Hey everyone, this is Matt Payton. I'm excited to present my final capstone project, Redesigning Nonprofit Statistics to Engage a More General Audience. After a lot of research, I ultimately decided to build my project around the Urban Institute's National Center for Charitable Statistics Nonprofit Sector Brief for 2018. Every year, the Urban Institute's NCCS collects, cleans, and shares data for researchers and policymakers in order for them to make better data-informed decisions. As a part of that annual production, they produce this year in brief report. My goal was to take that brief and make it more engaging by presenting the data in a visual format while also presenting more context in the hope that readers would be able to better absorb and internalize the information and also hopefully reach a broader audience who's not familiar with the terminology of nonprofits like these kind of experts are. I want to first back up to the start of the class though, and when I was thinking about what type of project I wanted to work on and what I wanted to accomplish over the course of this quarter. It's been really awesome seeing the divergent paths we've all taken depending on kind of our strengths, the skills we want to work on, and what we want to get out of this class. Throughout the entire program, I really felt myself gravitating towards these types of projects. Whenever we had some kind of flexibility in a project, I wanted to practice data visualization, I wanted to practice storytelling. And so this was a really great opportunity for me to bring those skills all together. It also came at a really great time for me professionally. I'd recently moved to a new job at the American Medical Association, and so wanted to kind of build out my tool set, build out my experiences, be able to practice something here in the relative safe space of the education world, so that I could bring that into my professional world and my career. And because this is a capstone project, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about a couple of the classes that most influenced this project for me, although all of the classes I took absolutely show up, and I think you'll see that. First, the effective communication class was really foundational for everything that came next for me throughout the program. Gave me a new way of thinking about communication and communicating ideas to different audiences. Next was the data collection and analysis class. And so originally my plan for this project was to do a data analysis. And after talking with my mentor, she pointed out that that was probably a bad idea. These people who look at this data, understand this data all day, are probably going to have a better grip on the nuances of the data, the ins and outs of it, than I would be able to gain in 10 weeks while also producing kind of a polished finished product. So that was really good advice. Next was the text and data visualization class. And that really, I think, is the most obvious class that comes through in this project. The impetus for this project was how much I enjoyed working on the assignments in that class and really wanted to dive back into that using the things I've learned in the classes I've taken since then and building one kind of overarching project that I could really be proud of. And finally, visual communication really gave me the tool set for kind of putting that final polish on this project. When we talk about fonts and colors and just kind of the feeling of the project, that's where a lot of that thinking came from. Once I decided that I wanted to do a data visualization project, I needed to start thinking about what the topic of that project was going to be. I wanted something that was broad enough that I'd have enough access to data and information to be able to build out a whole project, but also narrow enough that I could really dig into that data and try to uncover some insights. I also wanted something that I could take a more technical subject and apply it, bring it to a broader audience and try to communicate it that way. Pretty early on, I landed on the idea of doing something around nonprofits. A lot of my career has been working at nonprofits. It's something I'm familiar with and comfortable with, and so that seemed like a really natural connection. Initially, I was really interested in the Chronicle of Philanthropy's How America Gives data set. The problem with that is that it's proprietary. And so another goal I had of this project was building out my portfolio, being able to communicate and share this broadly. And that just wasn't going to be possible with that data set. After a lot of Googling, I kind of found these interesting articles here, and you can see the common theme is the Urban Institute. And so after poking around their website, digging in, I ended up finding that Year in Brief 2018, which seemed like a really nice summary that I could communicate, but also had plenty of depth to it to really dig in and explore that data set. For me, making that decision about what data set to use, what topic I was going to investigate for the rest of the class, was really the hardest part of this whole process for me. And so now that I had that data set and I knew what I was going to focus on, my attention turned to what story do I want to tell with this data? Was it going to be the same story that the Urban Institute was telling? And again, thinking about my desire to take this technical data set and the story and bring it to a broader audience, my focus was going to be a little different. And so I really need to investigate who is my audience, what knowledge are they bringing with them, and ultimately, how do I want to tell this story to them? And so here's just one page of my quick early sketches, putting some of the interesting statistics down, seeing how they lead one to another. How can I build kind of a narrative and story out of this that's going to make sense and that I want to bring my audience along for? Once I was comfortable with kind of the rough sketch of how that story was going to go, I wanted to quickly create some low fidelity drafts. And so this will look familiar to all of you. It is the out of the box Excel worksheet. And I really, one of the things I really valued from a number of classes was using that low fidelity to get something down, something to work with, but not spending so much time here polishing the axes, working on the fonts, all of that. And so with these rough drafts, I was able to then piece together a rough draft of the larger page, plugging in the text that was going to form the narrative between these charts before I really dug into kind of that visual communication aspect of the whole project. From there, I needed to choose a tool that I was going to produce the final visualizations with for the website. Now that I had these rough drafts, I had a better idea of what I needed the tool to be able to accomplish. There weren't any terribly complicated graph charts, and so that really opened me up to a broader range of tools. I first thought about using just the pure d3.js library. Again, we'd used that previously in other classes. The problem was that for the number of charts that I wanted to produce with the amount of polish I wanted to produce, it was just going to be a real tough uphill climb to get it done in 10 weeks. And so instead of recreating the wheel, I looked at some other data visualization libraries that would allow me to accomplish the same things in a much quicker time frame and be able to put more polish on the project. I looked at a tool called HighCharts. I've seen their charts before and was really impressed by them. But again, the problem was that's not an open source tool. And so I really wanted to build something that I could share the code for and that would be more applicable for a potential employee when I'm applying for a job rather than this kind of niche proprietary product. I also looked at a tool called Raw Graphs, which is great, produces really attractive visualizations. However, they're not at all interactive. They're just kind of PNG images. And I really wanted that kind of tool tipping and clicking around that a JavaScript library would give me. And so eventually I landed on Google Charts. It's open source. It's got some really nice kind of default built-in chart types, but it also has been around long enough that there's some customizations available. There's a pretty diverse community using it, and so I really thought that was a good balance for this project. Having landed on a charting library, I was then able to produce my first copy of those live charts and put them on a page with the text that I had produced. And then also put that first level of polish on. So be intentional about the fonts, be intentional about the colors, build out the structure, the hierarchies of headlines to get a sense of really how this was going to read and be used by an audience. This was the first time that I felt really good about my project and could kind of see that light at the end of the tunnel and see the project shaping up to be kind of like what I had imagined in my head. But this was also a good time now to turn to outside experts and sources for feedback to make sure I wasn't getting buried in the weeds, missing anything big before I really started digging into those fine details. And so the best feedback I got was from Jonathan Dunn. He has a PhD in mathematics and statistics, and this is feedback from the Data Visualization Society Slack channel. And so as you can see, I posted my project here, and he gave a long long amount of feedback. It's included in the appendix of my project, but it was great. It really helped me kind of focus in on what was going to be important, where I needed to spend time adjusting my charts and my narrative to really build out the project. And it was just great to get an expert outsider's point of view to something that I'd been kind of myopic about for so long. As you can see on the top left of the slide, that is my first low fidelity Excel chart. Below that is my first stab at reproducing that chart within the Google Charts JavaScript library. And then after that feedback that I got from Jonathan, on the right large there, you see what I ended up with. I have stripped out the stacking aspect of it. I've taken out the time series. I've removed grid lines, really overall simplified the whole thing. I was trying to do too much in too few of charts. And so that feedback was really valuable. I'm really happy with how this chart turned out. And I think had I not gotten that feedback, I would have kept kind of picking at that chart in the lower left there instead of taking a step back, thinking about what do I need this chart to accomplish and what's the best way to do it. And so this is the final version of my capstone project. This is the top of that website. You can see it's that same headline and copy I had. I added this background image as kind of a splash image to draw in the audience when they first get there. And I want to hit them over the head with charts and numbers right away. I also have a blank header, kind of blue bar there at the top. I've got a blank blue footer at the bottom. If this was produced for an organization or when I move this over to my personal site, that's where branding, navigation, things like that will go. But for now, I still thought it was important to include even just those blank ones to kind of give a foundation to the top and bottom of this page. Here's a couple of examples of charts found lower down on that page. It's looking at the number of public charities by type and then how that number grew or shrank over a 10-year period from 2005 to 2015. The thing I wanted to talk about here is that I found pretty early on that the Urban Institute has a data visualization guide. And so that includes everything from the fonts they use for their branding, the colors, types of charts you should use, types of charts you should stay away from, all kinds of really great information. A balancing act that I had to do throughout this project was how closely was I going to hew to that outline versus what decisions was I going to make on my own. And so I didn't want to completely throw it out the window. I did think if I was using Urban Institute data, it made sense to follow some of their branding. And so these are their colors that I've used here. It also helps that I just like them. But I did make some changes. This is not their kind of font of choice. There are some other styling details that I decided that I wanted to kind of break away from and make my own decisions on. After all, they're not hiring me as a client. This is my own project. And so it was a really interesting challenge to kind of have that resource available and think through each decision. Do I want to keep an 18-point headline font with 1.5 lines of spacing, you know, those kinds of things, and make my own decisions ultimately for my own final capstone project. Finally, at the end of the page, I wanted to include something in this project that would allow the audience to continue to do more research. Hopefully it piqued their interest. They wanted to continue learning beyond kind of the introduction that I had produced. And so I had kind of dreamt up this search box that would use the API of the IRS and allow people to search for kind of their favorite nonprofits and see the tax returns for them, right? Hopefully we've piqued their interest. I've given some context as to what these terms mean. Now go kind of use that to learn some more. I wasn't sure if I would have the technical skills to be able to accomplish this, and ultimately I didn't, but I got close, and with the help of my girlfriend, was able to get this working just kind of in the nick of time right before turning this project in. And so it's fun. You can type in any of the nonprofits that you're familiar with, that you've worked with, type search right there. It takes you to the IRS's website, brings up all of the documentation that they have available, so you can look through past tax returns, all that kind of public available information. And so hopefully that's the next step of this project. Someone is interested, they've enjoyed it, and they continue wanting to read and learn more. And so finally, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I've really enjoyed this class. I've really enjoyed the thoughtful feedback you've all have given me. I've really enjoyed watching your projects develop and change and grow over the course of the class. It was a really nice kind of full circle thing that some of the people in this class, I had my first class in the IDS program with. And so that feels really cool. I've really enjoyed this program. I've enjoyed this class. And part of what I've enjoyed so much was getting to meet so many interesting people, hear all of your experiences, and try to learn from those experiences. So I just wanted to say thank you, keep in touch, and good luck to everybody.